It is wild how much energy is being spent right now trying to build these massive, impenetrable walls against artificial intelligence. Across universities, the immediate knee-jerk reaction is to ask, how do we AI-proof our assessments? But according to some really fascinating emerging research, trying to lock AI out might not just be an impossible game of whack-a-mole, it might actually be the completely wrong approach to evaluating learning today.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a paper by Sam Elkington titled Assessing What Matters Most. We're going to take a close look at the argument that the rapid explosion of generative AI is forcing us to fundamentally redesign how we assess learning in higher ed. And look, we're not just talking about tweaking a few essay rubrics or updating the syllabus plagiarism policy here. This is about exploring a total paradigm shift toward evaluating what actually matters in this new landscape, which is human-centered work.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. The AI assessment panic, 2. A wicked problem, 3. Recentering human work, 4. Thinking with assemblages, and 5. Multimodal futures. Let's kick things off with Section 1, the AI assessment panic.
Look, we absolutely have to acknowledge the sheer disruption sweeping through educational institutions right now. We are moving away from an old reality that was built entirely around standardized assessments. Think back to that old model. Mastery was usually something a student proved completely alone, right? Usually sitting in a silent room, relying purely on their own memory and individual authorship. That's what we valued. But today, we are rapidly transitioning into a new reality defined by human-AI hybrid environments. In this world, knowledge is frequently co-produced alongside intelligent tools. The lines of individual authorship are getting really blurry, and it is fundamentally challenging our long-held assumptions about what counts as authentic student effort.
So how are institutions actually reacting to this massive shift? Well, mostly they're trying to build those higher walls we talked about. The default response often relies on intensified surveillance and highly restrictive test-taking methods. Elkington calls this a solutionist mindset. It's this false, kind of naive belief that a profound shift in how we learn can just be solved with a quick technical patch or a strict ban. This mindset treats AI like a temporary glitch that needs to be fixed, rather than recognizing it as a permanent fixture in our modern world. By focusing purely on keeping AI out, institutions are totally missing the opportunity to adapt to how work is actually getting done in the real world.
Which brings us to Section 2, a wicked problem. If technical fixes and strict bans aren't going to cut it, we need to understand exactly what kind of challenge we're really up against. The source material categorizes AI in education, not as some simple technical puzzle, but as a wicked problem. And a wicked problem, by definition, inherently resists easy, one-size-fits-all solutions. You literally cannot just buy a software patch to make it go away. It involves persistent trade-offs, and most importantly, it demands ongoing professional judgment from educators. Dealing with a wicked problem means you have to constantly adapt, you have to tolerate a lot of ambiguity, and you have to continually balance competing values on the ground.
To understand why navigating these competing values is so insanely stressful for educators right now, the paper looks at a sociological theory from Laurent Deveneaux called grammars of commonality. Think about a teacher's daily dilemma. On one hand, they have to speak the language of public justification, meaning they are required by the institution to ensure fairness, enforce accountability, and maintain standardization to stop cheating. But at the exact same time, that same educator is trying to speak the grammar of familiarity. This is the language of care, of nurturing learning, and meeting the highly specific individual needs of their students. This profound tension, being caught between acting as a strict institutional cop and a trusting mentor, that is the emotional core of this wicked problem.
Moving on to Section 3, recentering human work.
Since we clearly can't just ban our way out of this wicked problem, the paper argues we've got to fundamentally rethink what it is we are even trying to assess. There's this crucial quote from researcher Ethan Mollick that hits the nail on the head: learning to be the human in the loop. The whole argument here is that we have to stop viewing AI as something that simply replaces human effort. In a post-digital world, AI actually demands far more of our ethical and critical reasoning, not less. Assessment can't just be about grading a finished essay anymore, because honestly, an AI can spit out a finished essay in seconds. Assessment has to pivot. We need to evaluate the human judgment required to guide, curate, and critique that AI. Drawing on educational theorist Gert Biesta, the paper breaks down 4 distinct types of human work that our assessments really need to deliberately focus on now. First up is attentional work. This means teaching students what data or patterns are actually worth paying attention to in a massive sea of AI-generated noise.
Second is interpretive work, how a student takes that information and genuinely makes sense of it. Third, and this is a big one, is ethical work. This is that uniquely human ability to decide what is responsible, spot biases, and determine what truly matters in a specific context. And finally, relational work, how students communicate and defend their ideas alongside other people. Generative AI simply cannot do this subject-forming work. This is the cognitive heavy lifting that our new assessments have to be designed for.
All right, Section 4, Thinking with Assemblages.
So now that we know what kind of human work we want to assess, how do we actually design for it? The paper introduces this idea of an assemblage. I know it sounds like academic jargon, but it basically just means viewing assessment as a dynamic, interconnected ecosystem. It's like a giant puzzle. An assessment isn't just questions on a piece of paper. It's an active mix of people, tools, which definitely includes AI now, as well as physical and virtual spaces, plus all the underlying norms and histories of the school. A student's performance doesn't happen in a vacuum. It is deeply shaped by the software they're forced to use, the room they're sitting in, and whether the culture of their school is based on trust or surveillance. We have to intentionally design the whole shebang.
To help thoughtfully reshape this ecosystem, Elkington proposes a few specific design nudges. The first big question educators need to ask is, how do current elements shape student interaction? Think about it. If a digital learning platform feels like it's constantly monitoring you, or if the rules are super punitive, it's naturally going to push students toward defensive strategic compliance. They're going to focus entirely on not getting caught rather than, actually learning. If the goal is to cultivate human-centered reasoning, educators have to intentionally build spaces that actually encourage and reward intellectual risk-taking and open dialogue.
The second vital design nudge asks, how can we redesign to ensure equitable access? When schools just throw down blanket bans on AI or turn their tests into high-security lockdown zones, they often unintentionally end up punishing students who actually rely on those tools for totally legitimate reasons. We're talking about students who use AI for cognitive scaffolding, language translation, or accessibility needs. We've got to spot these hidden inequities. A truly human-centered ecosystem doesn't assume that every single student operates the exact same way. It builds in the flexibility to ensure everybody gets an authentic chance to show what they've learned.
And that leads us to our final section, Section 5, Multimodal Assessment Futures.
So if the traditional written essay is losing its spot as the ultimate gold standard for proving knowledge, what's next? Well, the paper points toward multimodality as a huge alternative. Basically, this means using a complex mix of resources, things like image, sound, spatial design, and narrative to express knowledge. Imagine a student creating a documentary film or an interactive digital exhibit instead of just handing in a report. Choosing the emotional pacing of a video, layering the right audio, deciding how to visually contrast conflicting evidence. Those are profoundly human choices. While AI can certainly help create some of those individual pieces, the holistic orchestration of meaning, that relies entirely on human agency and human judgment.
But how on earth do you grade that? The paper highlights 4 really helpful dimensions from researcher Jen Ross. First, you evaluate criticality, like why did the student choose this specific image instead of another one? Second, you look at how they are cultivating creativity in their approach. Third is holism, meaning how well the format they chose actually interacts with the content to create a deeper meaning. And fourth, valuing multimodality itself as a totally legitimate form of academic work. By using these dimensions, educators aren't just giving a letter grade to a shiny final product, they're evaluating the messy, interpretive, relational human work behind it. They are, quite literally, grading the human in the loop.
Which leaves us with this final, really powerful question to ponder. As you look at the educational ecosystems that you work in or participate in, are your assessments simply evaluating procedural compliance, or are they actively cultivating human judgment? Generative AI isn't going anywhere, guys. The research suggests that our job isn't to build a better wall to keep the tech out. Our job is to build a better assessment ecosystem that makes the human mind utterly indispensable. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.